Hi, this is Ben, and today we're going to be talking about effects. What we're going to do today is give a few comparisons between the realism of certain types of effects as opposed to others. To clarify, when we're talking about practical effects, we mean things like models, puppets, real sets, and makeup. And when we say CGI, we mean anything done on the computer. So CGI backgrounds with green screens, blue screens, digitally added characters using motion capture, or not using motion capture. The first topic we're going to focus on is the realism of CGI. You hear people saying a lot these days that CGI is ruining movies and it's always really obvious. But the truth is that people don't really notice bad CGI. If you don't notice it, then the people are doing their jobs well. Another key thing to note is that when CGI is used, it should be used tastefully. An overuse of CGI will often take the audience out of the movie and really just make people feel less engrossed. For instance, many people would complain about the Star Wars prequels, most specifically Attack of the Clones, for the overuse of CGI, and it shows. When you compare certain elements of the old Star Wars films, the difference is staggering. In Episode 2, George Lucas would have entirely CGI sets when there would have easily been a real set like there was in the originals. Then there are the characters. In the new films, not a single outfit was made for the clone troopers. They were all CGI. And this really takes away from the way they look. They lacked the certain human qualities that made the stormtroopers feel so special. The way they would stumble through doorways because they couldn't quite see very well. The thing that makes examples like these is the fact that they stand out when compared to the other people in the scene and the scenery itself. For example, there's this shot. The people in the scene do not look like they belong. They all stand out in front of the CGI dinosaurs, and the way that they are moving doesn't look like they're even in the same place. Look at that compared to this scene from Jurassic Park. Would you believe that this shot is entirely computer generated? Well, it is. The only thing that is real is the kids crawling through the car, which was a shot in front of a green screen, then added in later. And then this scene in Jurassic World with the dying dinosaur. Which was rendered in the computer. It doesn't look like they're actually interacting with it. Their hands have this sort of shadow that masks them and stands out on top of the dinosaur. As opposed to this scene with another sick dinosaur, where the actors really have something to interact with. So it really just depends on how CGI is used that can really make or break a scene. And the same goes for practical effects. When used correctly, practical effects can really add to a scene. For instance, something like this scene in The Dark Knight is something that would normally be done with CGI. But in this scene, everything was done in set, and you can really tell that it isn't done on the computer. The massive scale of it makes the audience think it was all CGI. The same thing goes for the original Star Wars, before computer-generated effects were around, how models were shot in front of a blue screen, and the blue screen was removed in post-production, and a starscape would be added in afterwards. It wows the audience knowing that what they're seeing is at least somewhat real. That's why old Java looks so much better than, quote, new Java. A lot of times, practical things like makeup can really make up the difference as well. For instance, in the original Lord of the Rings, there's a really big burly Uruk-hai, Lurtz, who is one of the antagonists of the film, and he's actually quite scary. The makeup is done so well that you no longer see a guy in makeup, and all you see is Uruk-hai. And in my opinion, he's a lot more terrifying in this. Azog, on the other hand, just looks like he's made of plastic, and he just lacks that texture that makes Lurtz seem more real. All of this being said, practical effects are not without their faults either. They can also make an audience feel like they're no longer part of the world, but rather they're watching some poor attempt at a homemade movie. The best thing to do to make a movie seem as realistic as it possibly can be is to use a combination of both practical effects and CGI. Using the two in tandem can really create the most realistic feeling possible, and it will often yield the best results as opposed to just using one or the other. Going back and forth between the puppets and the CGI in Jurassic Park gave the dinosaurs an overall more realistic feel because the audience knows that they're real for a good portion of the time, as opposed to 100% CGI raptors like in Jurassic World. Christopher Nolan uses practicality along with CGI exceptionally. For instance, in Interstellar, the landscape that they're standing on is a real place in Iceland, and then to make it seem more vast, a further background was added. Nolan is also a big fan of using models. The ship exploding in the scene is actually a 1/3 scale model that blew up and tore apart on soundstage. And then they added more parts flying off and more fire. Same goes for this scene from Inception. The building is a scale model that blew up, but it still totally looks like a real building, doesn't it? Because it was. But also, they added more to give it some more substance. So in conclusion, when it comes to effects, a blend of both practical effects and CGI effects all make the difference in making a film seem more realistic.